The last train of the night hummed through the city like a tired sigh. The lights inside flickered faintly with every sway of the carriage, and the rhythmic clatter of the tracks became a kind of heartbeat beneath the quiet breathing of strangers. It was close to midnight when he saw her. She was sitting by the window, a few rows ahead, her head resting against the glass as the world outside blurred into streaks of orange and blue. She wore a silk dress, something you didn't often see on this kind of train, not at this hour. The fabric caught the dim fluorescent light, glimmering like water each time the train rocked. Her shoes were kicked halfway off, her hair loosely gathered as if she had stopped caring halfway through the night. He noticed her because she looked out of place. Everyone else had that hollow-eyed commuter look, the expression of people counting stops, not moments. But she was still, peaceful, like she had drifted from another world. Her phone rested in her open palm, screen dark, and a thin strap of a purse hung from her shoulder. He guessed she had been to some kind of event, maybe a party, maybe a wedding, and somewhere between there and here, exhaustion had pulled her under. He tried not to stare. It wasn't his business. But there was something quietly vulnerable about her, this woman in a silk dress asleep on public transport after midnight. He knew how cities could turn on the unaware. Maybe it was the older sister who used to warn him about that, or maybe it was just the small, persistent instinct in him that couldn't ignore a scene like this. The train screeched into the next station, and a few passengers shuffled off. The carriage grew emptier. She didn't move. Her head tipped slightly, her hair brushing the window, lips parted as she breathed softly. For a while, he pretended to scroll his phone, pretending he wasn't watching out of the corner of his eye to see if anyone else noticed her too. A group of young men boarded 2 cars down, loud voices, laughter that didn't sound entirely friendly. They carried the smell of alcohol and arrogance, that loose kind of energy that made quiet passengers sink deeper into their seats. They moved through the cars, talking too loudly, jostling each other. When they reached this carriage, he felt the air tighten. She didn't wake when the doors opened. Her phone slipped from her hand and clattered softly onto the floor. The sound was small, but sharp enough to draw attention. One of the men, tall, buzzed hair, smirk too practiced, noticed. "Hey," he said to his friends, nudging them with an elbow. "Sleeping Beauty over there." The man in the corner, his name was Eli, didn't think. He just stood, crossed the few feet, picked up her phone, and crouched beside her. "Miss," he said quietly. She didn't stir. He said it again, softer this time. When she opened her eyes, slow and dazed, he saw confusion first, then recognition that she was on a train, that a stranger was crouched beside her, that her phone was in his hand. You dropped this," he said, holding it out. She blinked at him, then took it, murmuring something that might have been, "Thank you." The group had passed through the next door by then, their noise fading down the carriage, and he felt the tension ease from his shoulders. She rubbed her eyes and straightened, trying to gather herself. "Sorry," she said after a moment, her voice still heavy with sleep. "I must have fallen asleep." "It's late," he said. "Easy to do." She gave a small, embarrassed laugh and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Did I miss my stop?" He glanced at the route map above the doors. "Depends where you were going." Gardenvale," she said, after a pause. "You've got 3 more stops," he said. "You're fine." She smiled, relieved. "Thank you." He went back to his seat, but he could feel her presence now, the fragile quiet of someone trying not to fall asleep again. Outside, the city thinned. Neon signs gave way to the blur of suburbs, to darkness cut by streetlights and the rare car on the road. The hum of the train filled the silence between them. After a while, she spoke again. How long was I asleep?" He looked up. "A few stops. Maybe 20 minutes. God," she murmured. "That's embarrassing." He shook his head. "Could have been worse. I've seen people sleep straight past their line." She smiled again, faintly. Her eyes were clearer now, gray, maybe green, it was hard to tell in the light. She looked about his age, maybe late 20s. There was a calm in her face, but also a tiredness that felt older than she was. "Rough day?" he asked. She looked down at her hands. "Something like that." He didn't press. The air between them felt balanced, fragile, like a thread that could break with too much curiosity. The train rocked gently, and they fell into the kind of quiet that isn't uncomfortable. By the next stop, the carriage was almost empty. The group of men had long since gotten off. A couple sat at the far end, heads together, whispering. The conductor's announcement echoed over the speakers, half swallowed by static. She looked out the window again, her reflection framed against the glass. "Do you ride this line often?" she asked suddenly. "Most nights," he said. "Work runs late." "Where do you work?" "Bar, down by the river." "Nothing glamorous." She smiled. "Sounds more interesting than my job." "What do you do?" "Office stuff," she said vaguely. "Spreadsheets, emails, pretending to care about numbers." He chuckled softly. "So, the glamorous life." "Exactly." When the train slowed again, he saw her glance up, counting stops. "Two more," he said quietly. She nodded, her fingers tracing the edge of her purse strap. It struck him then how strange this was, two strangers on the last train, exchanging words that meant little and yet felt like a kind of trust. Maybe it was the hour. Midnight always had a way of softening the world, of making people braver, or lonelier, or both. The train lurched slightly, and she grabbed the metal bar beside her. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah, just clumsy." She laughed, but there was something in her eyes now, a flicker of hesitation. Maybe she was realizing the same thing he was, that she'd been asleep in public, that she didn't know him, that he could have been anyone. Her fingers tightened around her phone. He caught the look and nodded, slow, reassuring. "You're almost home," he said. "Just be careful when you get off. It's late." "Yeah," she said, softer. "Thanks." The next stop came and went. The carriage was nearly empty now. Eli checked the clock on his phone, 12:24 a.m. The last stop before Gardenvale was coming up. He'd have to transfer soon, in the opposite direction. He debated whether to say anything more. When the announcement came, next stop, Gardenvale, she gathered her things. Her shoes were half off again, she slipped them back on, straightened her dress. The fabric shimmered as she moved, catching light that made it look almost alive. She looked up at him once more. "Thank you, for, waking me. And for, being kind." He smiled. "No problem." The doors hissed open, letting in a rush of cold night air. She stepped onto the platform. For a moment, she just stood there, looking around as though the world had rearranged itself while she slept. Then she turned, walking toward the exit. He watched until the doors closed again. The train began to move, and he almost let it. But then he saw, through the window, a man step out from behind one of the pillars. Another figure loitered near the vending machine, hood pulled low. She didn't seem to notice them. Maybe they were just waiting for someone. Maybe not. Eli's stomach tightened. The doors were still open a crack, the system lagging before departure. He stood, crossed the carriage, and slipped through just as they shut. The platform was colder than he expected, the air sharp with that metallic tang of rail dust and rain. She was already halfway down the walkway. He kept his distance, not wanting to startle her. But the two men shifted, one of them beginning to follow. Eli quickened his pace. "Miss," he called softly. She turned, startled. When she saw him, her eyes widened, then softened in recognition. "Oh, did you forget something?" He shook his head. "Just thought I'd make sure you got through the station okay." She blinked, processing. Then, quietly, "You don't have to." "I know," he said. "Just, let me walk you to the exit." The footsteps behind them stopped for a moment, then resumed, slower, deliberate. She noticed now too, he saw the flicker of understanding cross her face. She nodded once. "Okay." They walked side by side toward the turnstiles. The station was mostly empty, the flicker of fluorescent lights above them casting long shadows. Her heels clicked softly against the concrete. He could hear the echo of the other pair of shoes behind them, still following, not close enough to confront but too close to ignore. When they reached the gate, she swiped her card, stepped through. He followed, pretending calm. The men stopped just before the gate, murmuring to each other. Eli met their eyes for a moment, long enough to make it clear he saw them. The taller one smirked, then turned away. Outside, the air smelled of wet asphalt and night-blooming jasmine. A faint drizzle began to fall. She pulled a small wrap from her bag and draped it over her shoulders. "You really didn't have to do that," she said softly. "I know," he said. "But I'm glad I did." She looked down the street, quiet houses lined up behind hedges, street lamps painting puddles of gold on the pavement. "It's this way," she said. "You don't have to come further. I can wait until you're inside," he offered. For a second, she hesitated, the polite refusal on her lips. Then she just nodded. Okay. They walked in silence. The neighborhood was calm, only the whisper of rain and the distant sound of a passing car. Her pace slowed as they reached a narrow path lined with low brick walls and jasmine vines. She stopped in front of a small townhouse, pale light glowing behind drawn curtains. "This is me," she said. He nodded. "Good." She turned to face him, her hair damp with rain now, the silk of her dress clinging slightly to her arm. "Thank you," she said again, and this time it wasn't just politeness, it was something quieter, more real. "I don't usually fall asleep on trains. Or talk to strangers." He smiled faintly. "Then tonight's an exception." She laughed under her breath. "Yeah, I guess it is." For a moment, neither of them moved. The rain thickened, tiny drops catching in the streetlight between them. "You should go," she said gently. "Before you miss your ride back." "Yeah," he said. But he didn't move right away. "Good night, then." "Good night." She unlocked her door and stepped inside. He waited until he heard the latch click, then turned and began walking back toward the station. The train would be gone by now, but there'd be a night bus in 20 minutes. As he walked, he thought about how strange the world was, how two paths could cross for such a brief moment and leave something behind. He didn't know her name. She didn't know his. But he would remember the sight of her asleep on that train, the shimmer of silk under the harsh lights, the quiet trust of someone who didn't yet know she could. And maybe, somewhere behind her window, she would think of the man who had made sure she got home safe.